the movie is sort of this like the redheaded stepchild of the Friday Night Lights extended universe. I feel like the book is always listed on any like best of sports books list, like greatest sports books of all time. Friday Night Lights is up there. It's often considered one of the best like nonfiction books. They reprint new editions for like the 25th anniversary and so on. And the TV show is firmly entrenched in the world of like prestige TV. Everyone knows like Kyle Chandler and Tim Riggins and all that stuff. And that is certainly like has its own legacy. The movie though is like good. It was certainly well received when it came out. It won some awards. It was on a bunch of top 10 lists. It made a bunch of money. But like I don't feel like people think of the movie much anymore. It's not really remembered. It's not considered like a classic film necessarily. In fact, if you Google, which I learned doing prep for this episode, if you Google Friday Night Lights movie, what comes up is like stories about whether or not they're going to make a movie out of the TV show. Like, even though the show's been off the air for like 15 years, you have to do so many qualifiers, like Friday Night Lights 2004 movie, real movie or something, to get results that are specifically about the movie that actually came out and like was really good. And I think it's sort of a shame because like for me, the movie was my first exposure to the story of Friday Night Lights. And I think it's a great movie, but I'm curious, like, what do you think? Is my perception fair? Do you feel that way about the movie? Like, what is your memory? What are your memories or your understanding of the film's legacy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised how sort of like kind of in the background it's sort of become because I think it's probably my favorite football movie, and I've seen a lot of fucking football movies, and it's one of the better sports movies of all time, I would say, certainly. Yeah, like when I typed it in on Netflix, it was like not even one of the first 5 results.
Yeah, like if you search for it, they're like
few results. I had to like scroll down a bit. Yeah, I mean, I think people do like it. Like we shouldn't overstate it. It's not like totally forgotten. I think like many people have seen it. Like Boobie Miles himself has sort of become a kind of like shorthand, and like Boobie Miles gets like mentioned in rap songs and stuff, and it's because of the movie. It's not because of anything else. People have seen this movie, people like this movie, but it seems to be remembered as like one of a type, one of a grouping, instead of like the sort of like standalone seminal piece of art, which is maybe fair and maybe unfair.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying. Like, it isn't like the movie was bad, and I think in some ways that's like what makes it so strange. As like the movie, like the reason they made the show was the movie did so well and people liked it so much.
Universal Pictures and the producer of 8 Mile present a true American story based on the best-selling book by Pulitzer Prize-winning author H.G. Bissinger. Friday Night Lights.
Make no mistake about it, gentlemen. We are in the business of winning. This is real, sincere warfare. And we will be perfect.
And I think that gives us a good transition to sort of talk about the changes that are made from the book to the movie, because some of them are just like, we're making a movie. We got to make some slight differences to tell our story differently. Like, it's a visual medium, so we got to add certain things that are visual. We got to compact the story. We can't go into like different backstories as much because we're going to tell just the story of this time period. And so there's certain changes that are like natural Hollywood or film adaptation changes, but other changes are like what I would almost call ideological changes. And that gets to sort of the point of what we're interested in, which is like the class and the racial dynamics get homogenized or drained from any real tension. And I think some of that is maybe unintentional. Like, a lot of people just absorb ideology and it gets propagated like without the filmmakers necessarily realizing it. Like, one small thing, for example, is just like the nature of how Odessa is depicted, which is like, as we said, there's no depiction of the oil industry. There's no analysis of it. There's even a line where I think it's Don Billingsley in one of the media scrums. He says something like, yeah, Odessa is a small town, and then goes yada yada, and then he makes whatever point he's trying to make. I forget exactly. I think it's like, everyone sees when you screw up or something. And like that's a point that like we talked a little bit about in episode 1. Odessa was not a small town. Odessa is like a relatively mid-sized city. There's like 100,000 people who live in Odessa. It's not this like local, rural, Sleepy Hollow community, which I think sometimes it gets depicted as, and the movie sort of subtly changes that into this world where, and it like the movie's a little inconsistent because like as we say, there's also 1,000 newspapers in this small town, and there's like, you know, there's like dinner parties, and you do see sort of like a little bit of like the dynamics played out, but they do kind of at least include the idea that Odessa is this like rural bucolic like Texas town. And there's no mention of the Hispanic community, which we talked about being like a huge part of the city and the school. And like Permian exists because the original school, Odessa High School, gets too big. And the reason Permian becomes the sort of football powerhouse is they sort of draw the lines so that like Permian becomes the like white school and Odessa High School becomes the like Hispanic school. And then there's this third school, which we talked a little bit about in episode 1, that gets closed, which is for the relatively small Black community. But you never get the sense in the movie that there's any Hispanic community to speak of. There's like one Latino player whose role is much smaller in the movie than in the book. And there's no sense that that's like the dominant part of the town or the city. And the Black community is seen as like essentially like just as big as the white side. You know, like we don't really get a sense that it's a much smaller part of the community than it really is. And you know, we'll talk about the racial dynamics more, but just like changes to Odessa are pretty important to the story because as we talked so much about in episode 1, this book is really about this place and this specific like world. And some of those changes I think are necessary. Like you can't really go so much into the oil industry, but some are like, well, why are you pretending there's no Hispanics here? Like, why are you pretending that this is a small town? Like there's a little, and it's a little bit like, again, it seems ideological to me.
Yeah. And I think the book does a good job explaining, like, you know, Brian Chavez, like the one Hispanic player who is like a star on the team. He comes from like his dad, you know, is like a lawyer and like is very successful and like they are like a upper middle class family, you know, and like that affects Brian Chavez's experience. Whereas like for most of the Hispanic community who like have this reputation of like not caring or not being good at football, like there is tension with the rest of the team, you know. And you know, in the movie, Chavez becomes like a stand-in for the Hispanic community, which is otherwise not seen. Similarly, you know, with Boobie Miles, the only real, I mean, I guess Chris Comer is kind of a character in the movie, and Ivory Christian is sort of very much minimized, which I guess we'll get to. But you know, Boobie Miles is like the focal point among the Black players in the movie, and we see his home life and like, you know, I mean, like they seem to have like a small house, but it seems to be together, you know, like and like there's a scene at the end where Bowie Miles is like bringing home a Christmas tree, and you know, him and his uncle LV are like making do, you know, and it doesn't convey the real story, which is like Bowie Miles like spent times, you know, months at a time, sort of like on his own, kind of like with seemingly insecure housing, you know, had come from foster homes. The movie does not really get at any of the tension between groups in Odessa or any of the real poverty. You know, you get like a less well appointed home, but that's all.